So anyway, welcome to everybody. Just want to read a little bio from our presenter today, who is Dhira Govinda Das. And this is his bio. David B. Wolf, PhD, has over 30 years of experience in diverse social and mental health services fields, including counselor training, medical social work, children and family counseling, executive coaching, spiritual life, coaching and development, and leading personal transformation seminars. In 1998, he started the Association for the Protection of Children, APC, an international child protection agency, and served as director of the APC for 6 years. As part of his doctoral studies, he developed the Vedic Personality Inventory, VPI, a personality assessment tool based on Vedic psychology, and researched the effects of mantra meditation. He is a world leader in the field of mantra meditation research, and since the early 1980s has practiced and taught bhakti yoga around the globe. In the 1990s, he began developing and conducting the programs that became the Sattva seminars and coach training programs. David and his team have conducted Sattva seminars in more than a dozen countries, including India, Russia, New Zealand, the Czech Republic, Guyana, and all around Western Europe and North America. He has coached and counseled thousands of people, groups, and organizations. He is the author of Relationships That Work, The Power of Conscious Living, and has been featured as a communication expert on media outlets such as Fox News and CNN News. So wonderful bio, very impressive. So I was the last minute fill-in for Bhakti Ross as a moderator since she couldn't find a place to go that had stable, reliable internet. So by my good fortune, it's really my good fortune to be able to have been able to do this session, because I've long admired and appreciated Dhira Govinda's work in both the child protection and also his emphasis on devotees doing their emotional work as part of their bhakti project. And so I'm just really grateful to be here today. And I'm excited, really excited to hear your talk. And I am going to try to make you into, spotlight you and have you get started. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you, Archana City. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Glad to be with you. About 15 years ago or so, yes, I was speaking with someone. He had participated in some of the Sattva seminars, and it's I don't know, maybe even he'll hear this recording. It's Dr. Michael Gresset Mahasomya Das. Hello, if you're listening to this. And so at that time, he was getting his PhD in Sanskrit or religious studies at University of Florida. And actually in his dissertation, he writes quite a bit about his Sattva experience as it relates to Vaishnava culture and like that. And something he shared with me about an interaction he had with a friend of his who is a carpenter named Nimai. Nimai also, going back about 20 years, has participated in the Sattva seminars and many of our programs. So Gresset's neighbor and friend is Nimai, the carpenter. Gresset, again, he was a professor, religious studies and like that. So Gresset shared that Nimai once told him, and he put this in his dissertation, he said, Nimai said, the people in this community, referring to a community that endeavors, where the members of the community endeavor to follow the principles of Bhagavad Gita, the people of this community, they don't get the first lesson of Bhagavad Gita. So Gresset was like, they don't get the first lesson. So, those who are familiar with Bhagavad Gita, well, the first lesson, the first principle, Bhagavad Gita, we might think something like, Tihinosmin yata dehe komaram yovanam jara, tata dehantara praptir diras tatranamuyati. The difference between spirit and matter, soul and body. But that's not what Nimai the carpenter was referring to. He was referring to, before that, before we get going with like verses 11, those sets of 20 verses, and starting with text 11 of chapter 2 that describe the distinction between spirit and matter. Before that, first chapter, beginning of second chapter. And Nimai said, the first lesson of Bhagavad Gita is to feel your feelings and express them. Okay. So that, of course, is referring to Arjuna. So our title here is Emotional Well-Being in Bhakti. Emotional Well-Being in Bhakti. So Arjuna is an emblem, an embodiment of that. Okay. So this is my perspective, that Arjuna is an example of so many things, but we're focusing here Arjuna as an example of honestly, vulnerably, courageously experiencing his experience, including experience of emotion, feeling, thought, and physical sensation, experiencing his experience and communicating it effectively. Okay. So it's not the whole picture of emotional well-being in life or in bhakti, but it's foundational. Without that, we're trying to go somewhere spiritually based on ignorance. That means ignoring what's there. So if we look at, Arjuna, he was experiencing and communicating, his limbs are quivering, his mouth is drying up. He shares that sin will overcome us, and he's feeling grief, sorrow, compassion, like that. So we can say, well, those feelings, they weren't transcendental. Okay, that's a whole nother discussion. But that Arjuna experiencing his experience of feeling, thought, and sensation, and communicating it powerfully, effectively, that was the seed, that was the catalyst for the most profound philosophical treatise of all time, Bhagavad Gita. That was the catalyst. And if we just look more into Arjuna's situation, that's very vulnerable. Arjuna, he's the alpha warrior of the age, practically the alpha warrior of all time. He's the alpha warrior of the age. And his experience of feeling, thought, and sensation, they're very non-warrior-like. So this is requiring a lot of courage, and he's weak. He can't even hold his bow. He's crying. He can't even stand up. Okay, so it's very non-warrior-like. So for Arjuna to experience his experience and communicate it effectively, these are foundational principles for emotional well-being. We have in our community here, we have a Chaitanya Charitamrita study group, and we're studying the verse on the chapter on the Atma Rama verse, chapter 24 of Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila. Towards the end of that chapter, after Lord Chaitanya explains the Atma Rama verse in dozens of ways, there's the story of Mrigari the hunter, and there's a text there, text 243, chapter 24. Mrigari says, "When I see half-killed animals suffer, I feel great pleasure." Okay, all right. When I see half-killed animals suffer, I feel great pleasure. So actually, yeah, about 10 days ago, I was about a week ago, I was in Denver, and I just mentioned about this. I was speaking with Tushta Krishna and Vrinda Sundari Prabhu's, their directors in ISKCON Denver. And so, so like, yeah, when I see half-killed animals suffer, I feel great pleasure, right? So it doesn't get more wicked and depraved than that. To enjoy seeing the torture. And then Vrinda Sundari commented, well, yeah, at the same time, there's something very honest there. So definitely. So for me, it points to emotional well-being in bhakti. That, okay. So, and she made the point that this hunter, he doesn't have any new age masks, doesn't have any devotee masks, any spiritual masks. Just so there's something simple and honest and childlike, and we might imagine that in that hunter's simple, childlike, honest expression, there's this. First of all, that's sattva. Sattva, we can think of sattva. We can think sattva means I'm always shanti, 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 but not really. Actual sattvic consciousness, we won't speak of transcendental consciousness here. Actual sattvic consciousness means that I'm able to access any emotion at will. If I'm free to access fierce anger, fierceness, to protect something dear, well, that's sattva. It means I'm free. It means I'm not controlled by anger. I'm not controlled by fear of anger. Sattva essentially means to bring to conscious perception that which till now has not been perceived. So we can imagine that, because even if the emotion, even if the feeling, the emotion we're connecting with, we're experiencing, maybe the shame, the jealousy, the envy, the hatred, whatever it is, maybe that's a rajasic and tamasic, whatever. The awareness of it, the connection of it, that's sattvic, and that's the doorway to genuine transcendence, not an artificial, false pseudo transcendence. So in that hunter's expression, we might imagine that that kind of shines a light on some childlike quality of this special soul that qualified him to receive the mercy of Srila Narada Muni. So because Carl Jung said, till we make the unconscious conscious, it'll direct our life, and we'll call it fate. So let's say if I'm attached to being seen as sattvic, being seen as a devotee, look, I got neck beads and I chant rounds and I make it to Mangalarti sometimes, and I'm a devotee. Right? So let's say if I'm experiencing bitterness because I feel mistreated. I feel mistreated, victimized. Okay, I feel bitterness, hostility, resentment. But maybe I have something less unconscious in me. A devotee isn't bitter. A devotee is forgiving and compassionate. A devotee is forgiving and compassionate. So then I won't even acknowledge the bitterness is there because I'm not allowed, because I'm too invested in my conversation with myself and my image to others. So maybe I'll put on a peaceful smile or something like that. Then till we make the unconscious conscious, it'll direct our life, and we'll call it fate. Then that bitterness will drive my life from beneath the conscious surface, or the shame, or the grief, or like that. So following Arjuna, following Mrigari the hunter, to experience our experience with the capacity when we choose to communicate it effectively. So Because tamas, or ignorance, really is not a strong foundation for emotional well-being, or for bhakti, or for devotional life or conscious life. Like ignorance means if I'm ignoring what's there because I'm pretending to be transcendental to it, then my spiritual life's finished. And willingness to accept, experience, and there's a distinction, not to resign myself to the shame I'm feeling, the envy that's burning in my heart. Resignation indicates hopeless, stuck. But whereas acceptance, a healthy foundation for inspired expansion and growth. So I recognize what's there. Okay, that's the beginning. That's the doorway to genuine transcendence. Okay. M. Scott Peck, in his seminal spiritually based personal transformation literature, The Road Less Traveled. M. Scott Peck, he starts the book, The Road Less. He was, just some context, he was a psychiatrist in like 1970s, even early 70s. He was a psychiatrist, and his book, The Road Less Traveled, became a real pillar of spiritually based personal growth literature. And he starts his book with 3 words. He starts his book with the simple sentence, "Life is difficult." So this is definitely a vital foundation for emotional well-being anywhere, including in bhakti or in materialism or the Brahmagoti, to get. Life is difficult. And then M. Scott Peck, in the first paragraph of that book, after stating life is difficult, he says, once we get, and we stop resisting that life is difficult, he said, then it no longer matters that it's difficult. Then our goal in life is no longer to fix the difficulties. Well, once I just adjust this, once I just take care of this financial thing, and this neighbor who's annoying me, and my household member who's very disturbed, and my own mind, once I just take care of this, then I'll be happy, peaceful. No, because if we do succeed to handle a disturbance and a difficulty, we can be assured there's going to be a next one, not just one next one, 5, 10, 15. I mean, I'm assuming everyone knows what I'm talking about here. And it's not, M. Scott Peck, all he's doing is quoting Bhagavad Gita in his own language. So it's an inherent place of difficulty. So then disturbance, difficulty, distress of so many types. Okay, so many types even. Okay, right. So like Srila Prabhupada, and this was of course 50 years ago, but he would say, okay, so sure, we can look, yeah, modern science has made so much success in curing diseases, so much success. So now we can see practically no more disturbance from disease on the planet. No, that's not. That's actually not the reality we're encountering, right? Or we can look at, as far as birth, death, old age, disease. If we look at this, if we look at the research, the statistics, as far as I've seen, death rate remains steady at 100%. It's an intrinsic disturbance, whatever we do. Right? Or Mark Twain said, I've been through many terrible things in my life, and some of them actually happen, indicating for me, as if life doesn't present enough disturbances, my mind will present like another 10 per minute. So M. Scott Peck emphasizes that once we accept life is difficult, then sure, we might attend to disturbances difficult, but the goal isn't to try to get rid of the difficult as like it's just like this false conception. Well, life life should be easy. It shouldn't be difficult. No, that's the inherent material nature. It's there in the Vedas, there in Bhagavad Gita. And once we get that, oh, okay, then we get to devote our living. Then we get to devote our living for higher principles. Krishna says, Bhagavad Gita, yehi samsparsha jamboga dukhiyanaya evate. That so wisdom means we're not going for temporary gratifications. We're not devoting our life for anything that at any time will be crushed by time, will be devastated by time. Yamhina yatyantete pusham pusharshaba samaduka sukamdiya samitatvaya kapate. That there'll be so-called material happiness, distress, and Krishna says, okay, so one who's not disturbed by them and continues with high-level purposeful living, continues steadily on the path of bhakti without getting distracted. Saint Francis said, we're searching for what is searching. We're searching for what is searching, right? So we have the peace within us. I mean, all those qualities that we're searching for: peace, empowerment, fulfillment, happiness, satisfaction, contentment, security, right there within it. Srila Prabhupada gives the example of the musk deer, right? The musk deer, the source of the sweet fragrance of musk. So apparently, from what we hear from Srila Prabhupada, the musk deer, it's there in the forests of the Himalayas. And the musk deer is apparently known to go kind of insane sometimes, frantically searching around the forest for the source of that sweetest fragrance, not realizing that the source is a gland in your own body. So searching frantically, I'll do this, I'll accomplish that, I'll get this respect, I'll get this position in the company, et cetera, I'll get this achievement, I'll acquire that. Then I'll be happy, free, secure, loving, this and that. But first I need that external thing. Right? So that's always chasing the carrot on the stick. That's always that illusion. And so realizing that, externally, things are never going to be exactly how I want to write the script. Sometimes it's like, this is the opposite of how I would write the script. And so again, M. Scott Peck, life is difficult. Get that. Then we can dedicate ourselves to living for God consciousness. Then we can it's a very spiritual treatise. He doesn't use the term bhakti. He's a devout Christian, like that. But the essence of Jesus's teachings, as we know, is definitely bhakti. Actually, we can imagine the mantra that Jesus chanted the most, the very bhakti mantra, the Maha mantra from the Old Testament. Love God with all your heart, all your soul, all your might. Bhakti, very bhakti text. So M. Scott Peck says, then we free ourselves to live for higher principle. And then sometimes the difficulties will be less and be relative material happiness. Sometimes difficulty will be more relative material distress. But that's not the thing. That's not the thing. So of course this is fully consistent with the well-known text spoken by Lord Brahma to Krishna in his prayers, Tate Nukampam Sismik Shamano, Vrjanevatma Kritam Vipakam Vibhag Vapgobir Vijadanamaste Jivitayo Mukti Pade Sadayava. That Brahma is describing what M. Scott Peck's describing, the devotional heart, the devotional consciousness, right? That whatever happens, whether it's how I would write the script, whether in the field of health, or the field of relationships, or finances, or career, or that book project, or my residence, whether things are going relatively how I would write the script or not at all, that we take it, we respond to it, we receive it, we process it we train ourselves to process that with deepened enthusiasm for self-realization, starting with encountering ourselves honestly, true sattvic living, self-realization, and deepen inspiration to serve God, serve Krishna with love and devotion. And it's like, to the extent that that's my goal, self-realization, self-discovery, deepened enthusiasm for genuine bhakti, not the show of bhakti, genuine, but to the extent that that's my goal, then I'm guaranteed to always be successful. Because in any life situation, including and maybe especially those where this is so-called unfortunate, there's always abundant opportunity to deepen my dedication, to pull the weeds in my heart, dedication to self-realization. So we're talking. I'll say here we're speaking here. I'll call it about like spiritual responsibility. Earlier, we kind of alluded to a different, I'd say there's a few dimensions of personal responsibility. And personal responsibility is key principle for emotional well-being anywhere, including in bhakti. And there's different dimensions of personal responsibility. We're touching on a few. Like we might say, emotional or experiential responsibility, well, that's key. We talked earlier about Arjuna, Margari the hunter. So like emotional experience, so I can say like, well, yeah, well, because he did that and she said that about me, that's why I'm resentful. And because he didn't do that, he criticized me unfairly, that's why I'm bitter. So emotional responsibility is getting that's nonsense. That I'm resentful because I'm the source of resentment. I'm depressed because I'm the source of depression. I'm alive in a sense of humor and compassion because I'm the source of that. Now, I might certainly retain my opinion that what he did is unethical and what she did is unprofessional and immoral and unfair. And as Viktor Frankl said, between stimulus and response, there's a moment of choice. So what am I doing? What am I creating in that moment of choice? So emotional responsibility, key for emotional well-being, is sattvic consciousness, awareness, embracing responsibility for what I create in that moment of choice. And there's nothing wrong with being the source of anger or sadness. Right? Every emotion has its healthy place. It's just a matter of kind of like to cease, to stop, to blame the context for the content. So the context, there will always be difficulties. And if my emotional habit is to blame the context, the disturbance, the external, whether it's disturbance from others, from my own mind, from eating, sleeping, mating, defending, the propensity for others to cheat me, and the propensity for me to cheat others. Right? Like if all I'm seeing is that I've been victimized and cheated, well, and probably I have, but wisdom means also saying, and I cheat others, and I've taken advantage of others for my petty desires like that. That's certainly part of wisdom too. So that between stimulus and response, there's a moment of choice. So it means that, okay, there's always going to be disturbances in the context, in the context. And how am I responding to it? As maybe many of you know, I've done over the decades, I've served a lot in fields like child protection, feels like child protection, right? And okay, so like some say, like statistically speaking, a relatively high percentage of those who are maltreated as children, then they abuse children, when they get older. You can say, well, that's because they were abused as children, but let's take a look at that, because there are some who are terribly maltreated as children, And as they get older, they dedicate their life not to abusing children, they dedicate their life to be advocates and champions to prevent child abuse. So pretty much same stimulus, different response. So emotional responsibility, which can be heavy to contemplate, but also very liberating when we get it. And this isn't meant to avoid empathy. I think in our closing part, I'll talk about empathy in relation as a foundation for emotional well-being. And then spiritual responsibility, like practical responsibility is, how did I set that up? What did I do to contribute to that? What did I do? What did I say? What did I not do? What did I not say? Okay. And spiritual, whereas practical responsibility is, how did I create that? Spiritual responsibility is, how come I co-created that, albeit less than consciously, with higher power, with Krishna, with whatever someone, with God, with universe, whatever someone references, whatever term someone uses. How come I co-created that less than consciously? So that gets to the essence of what, of the Tate and the compound verse of what M. Scott Peck is saying there. So this is not meant, it's not meant to encourage the proverbial spiritual bypass. Like let's say something apparently unfortunate happens to me, and we all have apparently fortunate and unfortunate things happening on different dimensions to us. All right, so then something apparently unfortunate happens to me, and then I immediately go to, I know it's God's plan for me. I know it's Krishna's plan for me. Okay, well, maybe it is Krishna's plan for me. Could be. I mean, that's a theological, philosophical discussion. Okay, could be. But an important question in relation to emotional well-being and bhakti is that so am I going to, I know it's Krishna's plan for me, in a way that I'm avoiding doing, let's call it the heavy lifting, the courageous introspection of emotional responsibility, and looking practically. How did I set that up? What did I do? What did I not do? How to do the work that where I'm supporting myself. M. Scott Peck, again, M. Scott Peck said the path to sainthood goes through adulthood. So adulthood is characterized in large part by emotional responsibility. I'm the source of my experience, and practical responsibility. If I want to look at who's responsible for the results in my life, I look in the mirror. Now, it doesn't mean that others haven't treated me nasty or wrong or immorally, or that they may have. They may have, and I'm cultivating the capacity, because it's a different responsibility is a different conversation than guilt, shame, right, wrong, ethics. Certainly in human life, there's such an important place for conversations around ethics and morality and good, bad, right, wrong. Important place for that. Oftentimes, though, those conversations, good, bad, right, wrong, oftentimes they tend to be closed-ended conversations. Yeah, you're wrong, I'm right. Okay, I'm to blame. You get the credit, or okay. All right. Whereas a responsibility conversation, how did I respond to that situation? What could I have done different? Responsibility tends to be a discovery conversation. This is like a hallmark of, again, the path to genuine saint, the path to sainthood goes through adulthood. So emotional responsibility, practical responsibility, and then, so am I going to pseudo spiritual responsibility? I know it's God's plan for me, but in my heart, I'm retaining all sorts of resentment and bitterness, and I'm not looking at how I set that up, because not looking how I neglected that person. So of course, he then treated me that way. Not that it makes him right. Not looking at maybe the subtleties of my nonverbal communication that invited that sort of response. to avoid that heavy lifting, which can require vulnerability and courage? Am I jumping to, I know it's Krishna's plan for me without going through the actual learning process, but I get to look saintly because something apparently bad happened, and I'm jumping to, I know it's God's plan for me. So I see these principles of the capacity spontaneously to experience my experience and communicate it effectively when I choose. When I say when I choose, it's not that like I'm experiencing something, oh, now to be like conscious, I need to immediately express it. You know, I need to wear my heart on my sleeve. No, it means like when communicating my experience of emotion, feeling, thought, physical sensation, when communicating that is aligned with my life purpose, I'm able to communicate it effectively so people get me. So, or maybe more aligned with my life purpose is, for now, I'm choosing silence, and choosing silence is distinct from I'm too scared to speak out of tamas or rajas, fear. I'm too scared to speak. I don't want to rock the boat. That's different than I'm choosing silence right now. And I could communicate if I choose. It's just not aligned with my life purpose. So these are essential principles for emotional well-being and bhakti, as is, I'll call it all three dimensions of responsibility: emotional, practical, spiritual. And again, this is not meant to encourage in any way the proverbial philosophical or spiritual bypasses. So like, as we gave the example, a great example of emotional well-being and bhakti, Gari the hunter saying, when I see half-killed animals suffer, I feel great pleasure. So that's the thing, like to have the courage, like, okay, we, well, we got these like deep, dark, wicked feelings, to acknowledge it. And I would say in relation, to be responsible, sincere in relationship, right? Srila Rupa Goswami, he describes exchanges, he describes characteristics, qualities that symptomize exchanges of, create a container for exchanges of affection between spirit souls and having human experiences who are sincere about self-realization, self-discovery, paramatma, super soul connection, bhakti. Okay. So as probably those who are listening know, so datati pratikrinati guyam akiti prichati. So guyam akiti prichati means to create space, to create containers in our relationship that are conducive, that are inspiring for sharing the heart and mind confidentially, for inquiring confidentially, hearing confidentially, like that. Really, it's almost 30 years ago. It's around 1995. I started conducting communication-based bhakti workshops in the Vaishnava communities in Alachua and New Vrindavan by the late 90s. And then by about 2004, more than 50% who came to our programs did not identify with the bhakti communities, right? And however the participants identify or don't identify, everything in the programs is fully based on Prabhupada's teachings. So they're getting Bhagavad Gita experientially and conceptually. So I remember one of the early workshops, like a 3-hour workshop I conducted. It was with a men's group in North Florida. And I mentioned that quote from Srila Rupa Goswami, right? A safe place to reveal the heart confidentially, share the mind confidentially, inquire confidentially. And he said, Prabhu, this community is the last place in the world I'd want to reveal my mind confidentially. So others laughed, because if we don't laugh, we'll cry. Everyone experience that. There's truth in humor. There's truth in humor. So So such things, this, so like there's the watering process, watering the garden, and there's pulling the weeds. Pulling the weeds, the Sanskrit term, anartha nivritti, one Sanskrit term. It's not an optional part of bhakti or creating relationships, whether it's people who identify with persons who identify as bhakti yogis or not, but creating relationship. As I've often said, I'm not intrinsically interested to collect communication skills, and let's get good at communication skills. I am enthused about a communication-based approach to self-realization, where sure, in cultivating excellence and being a deep listener, excellence in communicating my experience effectively so you get me, that our relationship supports those higher principles of life, supports the self to connect with itself. We support each other in that most distinctive aim of human life, the self to turn towards itself in self-realization, and to turn towards the divine, turn towards Krishna in a spirit of devotion. Then I'm excited about refining communication capacities for that purpose, for that goal. So, just the gardening analogy, and like Sri Rupa Goswami's Siksha, Lord Chaitanya's teachings to Srila Rupa Goswami, right? So there's watering, and then there's weeding. And if I don't weed out weeds of envy and arrogance and deception and laziness and et cetera, if I'm not weeding, then even the watering, I'm watering the weeds, and then the weeds strangle the flowers. And maybe I believe I'm seeing what the weeds in others are, but the weeds in my own heart, I'm thinking they're pretty flowers, because that's the nature of self-deception. So that in relationship, in that safe space to reveal the heart confidentially, to give honest feedback, to inquire confidentially, we get to support each other where we have blind spots due to some ahankara, blind spots due to false ego. And again, and we've seen this a lot, right? So like if we don't pull the weeds, then we get no taste, because then let's say if I'm not pulling the weeds of feeling superior or arrogance, then maybe each shloka I learn, every time I rise early, attend devotional program, Mangalarti, every time I chant extra rounds, that's like more evidence that I'm superior to you. Okay? So I'm watering the weeds, and then of course I'm not getting any taste, because it's more and more about adoration and distinction and compliments and popularity, et cetera, et cetera. So this pulling the weeds, it's not optional. It's an intrinsic. It's like 2 tracks: watering and weed pulling. So we get the opportunity to create relationships where we're truly supporting each other to honestly encounter ourselves, and that's true self-realization based, genuine Vaishnava Sangha, Vaishnava relationship. Yes, it's so fortunately in bhakti, very fortunately, bhakti, Srila Prabhupada gives us a process based on eternal wisdom tradition, the bhakti tradition, to genuinely become Atmarama, self-satisfied. We talked about that in regards to the musketeer and St. Francis's quote, "We're searching for what is searching." To genuinely become Atmarama, and to realize who we are is not the body, a spirit, soul, and that's not sufficient in bhakti. No, that's not sufficient. That's a nice beginning, and to be completely peaceful through dynamically engaging actively in bhakti, Krishna Bhakti, Nishkama, Ata Eva Shanta, then completely peaceful, Bhukti Mukti Srikami Sakaliya Shanta. And so in relationships where it's just like we create these spaces, again, a safe place to reveal the heart confidentially, which means I'm ready and enthused to genuinely listen genuinely listen to you, to understand, right? Sometimes I can be apparently listening, but I'm not so much listening to what you're saying. I'm listening to what I'm saying about what you're saying. Oh, well, soon it'll be I'm listening to reply, not to understand. Soon it'll be my chance to reply, and I'll show that I'm smarter than you, or like that. So sattvic listening with compassion, without any intention to coerce or manipulate. And there's many, all through Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Prabhupada's teachings, so many examples of natural Vaishnava empathy, right? 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Atmopamyena Sarvacha Samam. And Krishna talks about the true yogi in comparison with his own self, which means through sattvic self-awareness. The true yogi naturally is empathic with the happiness, the distress, the whole continuum of emotions in others. So there's a saying that in some circles, a conversation is a vocal competition where who's ever catching their breath is called the listener. Okay. So what Rupa Goswami describes, a space, it's a safe and sacred space to share the heart confidentially, share the mind, inquire confidentially. It means it's not this simultaneous monologue culture. It's a culture of genuine dialogue. There's a letter from Srila Prabhupada to Balavanta Prabhu, who resides here in North Florida, and December 1972. And Srila Prabhupada, he says, if Prabhupada writes, if we want to attract, he specifically says, if we want to attract intelligent people to the Krishna conscious movement, Prabhupada says we need to be really good listeners and understand their point of view. And Prabhupada's not saying we pretend to agree if we don't agree, right? There's an important distinction between understanding and agreement. So, but Prabhupada said, if we want to attract intelligent people, we need to be really good listeners, understand their points of view, show that we're understanding their points of view. Prabhupada gives the example of, said, Lord Chaitanya was listening deeply for days and days to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And we understand Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was speaking Mayavad. We understand that. But then Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, then he was like, as the saying goes, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. Until they know that you care. And so Sarvabhauma, you got, wow, you've suspended whatever you want to say. You really listen. Now I want to, now I care what you know. And then Lord Chaitanya's like, okay, well, since you asked, on the platform of being received. So this understanding is sometimes compared to like life air. Like if I get the air knocked out of me, I get the wind knocked out of me, you could offer me a bag of money. You could tell me, Dhira Govinda, you're a great guy. You can be compliments. It won't matter. All I want is air. I just need breath. Similarly, like particularly in emotionally charged situations around bitterness, hurt, resentment, anxiety, fear, oftentimes all we want really is understanding. Understanding can be life. And at that times, even apparently astute advice or a brilliant analysis or praise, it won't nourish the heart. It won't nurture the soul. So this is key. It's a key element, again, of Rupa Goswami's paradigm for genuine bhakti relationships, where truly safe place to share the heart and mind confidentially and to inquire, give and receive feedback, give and receive affection, give and receive honesty, like that, appreciation. Okay, so I've shared what I regard as a few foundational principles and processes related to emotional well-being in the process of bhakti. I'll pause there, and I welcome if anyone would like to share any comments, realizations, inspirations, ask any questions, if anyone would like to.
Yeah, and I will allow participants to unmute themselves. So if anybody would like to ask a question, you can unmute yourself. I do have a couple comments from Brinda Sundari. Let's see. Yeah, so this is from Facebook. So I guess we did make it live on Facebook, which
Good.
Was excellent. We had some devotees. Anuradha alerted some devotees to come on and give us help. And I'm really grateful to Krishna Kumar and Ravi for jumping right in and coming and saving the day. So first of all, I'd like to thank you very, very much for that really inspiring talk. And just, it makes so much common sense when you hear it, you know, that how emotional well-being is so integral to our spiritual well-being. And it's like, how can anybody not get that? But obviously it's still a thing where it seems like there's some resistance, but not as much as there was back in 1990 when I first started doing this work myself. And I'm sure you probably see less resistance now than there was then. So things are changing, right?
That's my experience, and yeah, and my part of my endeavor is to excavate how this isn't like new, or this isn't like something that could support or complement what Prabhupada gave us. No, this is all integrated in Prabhupada's teaching.
Absolutely.
And now it's an aspect of the teachings that maybe many in his movement have tended to neglect, and again, I see it as part of my service to endeavor to excavate. And unearth what's there. So it's not like something new that can help bhakti. It's integral.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that.
And I'll just share Archana Siddhi Prabhu that I just remember finally, I think it was 24 years ago. You and I discussed this before we came on this evening, but yeah, you attended a workshop I conducted. It was one of the early transformative communication workshops. It was in New Vrindavan. It was either 1999 or the year 2000. And I much appreciated how much encouragement and support I felt from you because we realized we're so like-minded in the flavor and direction in which we were endeavoring to serve Prabhupada's movement. So I just have very sweet and fond memories of that.
Well, thank you so much. I also remember that very clearly, and there aren't so many things I remember clearly, so it obviously made a great impression on me. Yeah, so here we go from Brinda Sundari, who you just were out in Denver with her, I think.
Yes.
So,
yes.
So this is a comment. Let's see. Sometimes I hear from devotees the belief that bhakti is potent enough on its own to overcome emotional and mental issues. So if we perform practices of bhakti, there is no need for say, a 12-step program or to overcome an addiction or therapy to support mental health. And then she also carries on and says, unfortunately, I haven't seen anyone fully overcome mental illness or emotional traumas, etc., through devotional practices alone. But to admit this seems to infer that bhakti practice is not potent. So.
Okay. All right. I appreciate that comment, that question, that direction of discussion. Yes. Yeah. Okay. All right. So something coming to me around that. Thank you, Brinda Sundari. Thanks for sharing that. So, I mean, my understanding, my view, I'm not saying I have much realization, is to chant Hare Krishna and study Bhagavatam and follow the program Prabhupada gave us. That is completely potent. There's nothing missing there. So it's like, well, okay. So that, well, what I found, but I'm chanting I'm chanting, and then all this stuff comes up, maybe a disturbance, anger, resentment, lust, greed. Okay. So then the process, yeah, so the process isn't working. It's not powerful enough. I need something else. So I see it, well, no, it actually shows that this like chanting Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, it's the most powerful process in the universe, beyond the universe, in creation. So it's actually evidence that it is working. Just like if I pour water on the flowers, then the weeds come up. I pour water and the sunlight and the nutrients and the weeds come up. So the process isn't working. No, that's a sign the process is working. Now my responsibility is the weeds have come up because I'm in the process. My responsibility is to pull those weeds. My responsibility is to pull those weeds. Pulling the weeds is part of the process of growing a beautiful, fragrant garden. So sure. So chanting Hare Krishna, it's the most powerful process in existence. And if I'm chanting Hare Krishna, one of the effects of that process is that all sorts of junk in my heart, all sorts of covering of the diamond soul, all sorts of junk that I didn't even know was there is going to come up. And that's like, oh, well, I was happier before I started chanting Hare Krishna, but now there's all these weeds of deception and greed and envy and jealousy and like that. So, a view I'll present is, it doesn't mean the process isn't powerful. It means the process is powerful. Now it's my responsibility. It's my responsibility now that those weeds have come up to pull those weeds, rather than, oh, I'm a devotee, so that hatred, that bitterness, that rage, that's not supposed to be there. So I'll push it back down and make myself crazy because I'm pretending that, because that's ignorance in the name of transcendence, because I'm pretending that something that's there isn't there because it doesn't meet my sattvic spiritual devotee image. So that's, I've seen that phenomenon a lot. So because the chanting is powerful, stuff comes up, stuff gets unearthed, and instead of looking at it honestly and pulling that weed, whether through more pure chanting, whether through a truly transformational seminar, whether through this whatever, I'm responsible to pull that weed. But instead, I can push it back down and blame the process and blame the process. So part of the power of the watering processes of bhakti is that the weeds will come up, and then how do I respond to them? What do I do with them? And if because sometimes I'll just keep chanting. Well, chanting is pure and powerful. Yes, Namo Chintamani Krishna Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha Purnashuddha Nityamukta Bhinavan Namanamina. Krishna is perfectly pure, transcendental. Same time, am I doing the chanting to avoid the ugliness I see inside? To avoid letting that come up and looking at it squarely, as humiliating as that might be, and then blaming the chanting. So these are some thoughts that come to mind.
Very nice. Yeah, and there's another devotee commented on this, and so we can continue the discussion. It says, yes, it seems that Krishna doesn't mind so much our dysfunctionality, or at least allows us into the family, unless and until we ourselves indicate we want to work on what can be called our character defects. Of course, in anartha nivritti, the letting go of qualities that no longer serve us there, but often that part is left not practiced, or practiced in a pretty haphazard or wishful thinking kind of way.
No.
We have to have raw honesty when it comes to admitting our shortcomings, and share in confidence with those we trust and can be trusted. Other than that, yes, there are many support groups like 12-step programs. So that was another comment.
Thanks for that. From what something I'm getting from that.
That was on Facebook, and I guess Patrick Padma, he was responding to probably Brenda Sundari's comment.
Who wrote that?
Patrick Padma.
Padma. Okay.
Padma.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, I like the language. We can engage in anartha nivritti haphazardly, rather than with focus and determination, with dridhavrataha. And so then the effects will also be haphazard and whimsical and not complete and not a rigorous, consistent pulling of the weeds. And also like what Patrick Padma expressed there, that could essentially, if we go somewhere, a 12-step program or whatever. So essentially, a big part of that is creating a space where we can share the heart confidentially and reveal the mind confidentially. And so that's key, that we're surrounding ourselves with people, whether it's in officially the Vaishnava community or somewhere else. We're surrounding ourselves with people who care enough about us to not care whether we like them, care enough about us to give honest feedback about where we have our blind spots, our shadow side, where we're in self-deception, where we're self-sabotaging. And then I can be reactive to that, and how dare you say that, or I can really appreciate that you're really being my guru, you're really helping me in my anartha nivritti process. And so that's not like aside from the bhakti process. No, again, we had Rupa Goswami saying that's essential in relationships, that relationships serve that purpose, right? The Catholic tradition has the confessionals. I've been recently reading some literature from Saint Teresa of Avila. It's a quite amazing literature, but she has her confessors. And so I know in our transformative communication Sophoto programs, we're committed, we endeavor to create spaces where it's a safe place to look at the weeds, look at the junk, and not just to wallow in I feel this, I feel that, but to pull them and to free the diamond to shine brightly. So that I see that when the intention is for self-realization and enhanced freedom to really engage in bhakti, then such communication, such process, it's not separate from the process of bhakti. It's part of it.
Very nice. Yeah. So I just want to check in. We do have another comment on Facebook. If anyone on Zoom would like to unmute yourself to ask something, I'll give you first priority here. Anybody? Okay, well, you can raise your hand if you do have it, and I'll check back in with you after this. So this is from Surya from New Zealand on Facebook.
Surya Narayan in New Zealand. Hare Krishna.
So you know him.
Yes, I do.
Very nice. In relation to the candid mood of the hunter, my experience was that myself and my drug indulging friends from my previous life were unapologetic, and in that way, I guess, honest in who they were. There wasn't much of a need to hide. It was only when I joined the Hare Krishna movement that I really learned how to live in dualism, presenting an outer persona while a storm raged within. I found the environment to be very fear and pride-based, and I bought right into that. I watered the weeds and got addicted to the payoff. In a lot of ways, I replaced one intoxication for another.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for sharing, Surya. Thank you. And yeah. So
you want to make any comment on that?
yeah. Well, so Surya, clearly You should go back to your druggy friends from 35 years ago. No, that's not actually my conclusion, but Surya and I have a relationship where I feel comfortable to say that. Joking spirit. And thanks for sharing, Surya. So it's very sad what you share. It's very painful. And it relates to a comment I shared earlier when back in 95, I was conducting a workshop in the devotee community and someone said, "Dhira Govinda, this community is the last place in the world I'd want to reveal my heart and mind confidentially." And that's why I relate to what Vrinda Sundari shared. I'll go to a therapist here. Nothing wrong with going. I'll go to this program, 12-step program there. And that, like we're each responsible. What's going to serve us? But so what you're sharing, Surya, it's true for you, and I know it's true for so many. I've experienced it, witnessed it myself over many decades. So. And I think that points to why, there's a feeling of a need to have presentations like this, emotional well-being in bhakti, because in the name of institutionalization and in the name of so much of what has gone in the name of pure bhakti, it's become a mask, it's become a devotional mask, and it's become for so many, individually and in terms of group and organization and temples, it's become this calcified facade about adoration and distinction and maybe some profit, and then the actual weeds grow, and then and all sorts of tragedies and catastrophes happen because I will not admit what's there. Well, even not to myself, what to speak it to, I won't admit what's there. And then what's there dries my, as Carl Jung said, till we make the unconscious conscious, we'll direct our life and we'll call it fate. Then what's there, the greed, the envy, the blind ambition, which of course isn't there because I chant my rounds, or at least I pretend to chant my rounds, and like that. So I've got this whole image, and people bow down to me. How dare you try to point something out to me? People bow down to me, and so then that blind ambition for adoration and power like that's going to draw me and that creates harm and hurt and destroyed lives and wounded lives. And we know, we can make jokes, but catastrophe and tragedy, because this whole aspect of bhakti has been sorely neglected. And so what you experienced, and what so many have experienced, what you experienced, it's not meant to be that way. That wasn't Prabhupada's mood. It wasn't meant to be that way. That you went from your friends with the degraded habits like that to the so-called bhakti institution, and then it's this life of pretense and contrivance and facade. That's not what Prabhupada taught. It's not what he lived. And it's not what he personally established. So we're endeavoring to restore that vital aspect of Prabhupada's mission. I appreciate very much your sharing.
Thank you for that comment. Comment to his comment. I have a question. When you were talking about when something unfortunate happens to devotees, that some devotees will say, "Well, I just know it's Krishna's plan for me," and move on from that, but be holding on to a lot of resentment and bitterness. So my question is, that's for a devotee to even say that it's Krishna's plan, but what I hear a lot is that how could Krishna be a loving God if he would let such a thing happen to me? So I'm wondering how you navigate those kind of feelings that come up, and it's not a very rare, it's not like it's a rare kind of response to bad things that happen to good devotees.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing and asking that, Archana Siddhi. Well, I endeavor, and I've certainly encountered that regularly over the years and decades. Well, I'll endeavor to meet someone where they're at, with empathy. I hear your confusion. I hear your pain. You've given your life to serve Krishna and Prabhupada's movement. And now this thing, at least, this unfortunate thing is happened. And I hear hear your anger, to meet them where they're at. Like, in some sense, it'll depend on the container of trust in our relationship. I'm not going to see it as my role to start philosophizing. Well, what about the law of karma? What about tate nukampam susu? I mean, if I sense they're really wanting for me to give philosophical perspective, but I certainly wouldn't see it as my role to force myself. I'm thinking of, when I established a child protection office, I'm thinking of, there was a few Vaishnava youth, and they were maybe in their 20s at that time. I'm thinking of one conversation in particular. And this person, because what happened to him as a youth in the organization, and then he had more doubts, even more than doubts about Srila Prabhupada. Okay, and he had formed some rough opinions about Srila Prabhupada. Okay, and of course he'd abandoned most all of his practices of bhakti, and he was sharing with me about Srila Prabhupada, and it was, in a sense, it was challenging for me to hear, but I was with him. In his anger towards Srila Prabhupada. I could have gone to Prabhupada's Shakti Vaishnava. I was with him in his anger with Srila Prabhupada. I was with him in his doubts and his feeling oppressed, and it was unfair. It was unfair what happened to him, and his anger, his insecurity, his painful angst, anxiety, confusion. So I was with him. So I endeavored to be with someone wherever they're at. And then we talked for about 2 hours. By the end of the 2 hours, even way before, he was expressing his very deep, heartfelt appreciation for Srila Prabhupada and his affection for Srila Prabhupada. And then he was expressing understanding of what Srila Prabhupada established in the essence of his teachings and how they were twisted and misapplied. Now, let's say if an hour earlier in the conversation it came from me, like, well, that's not what Prabhupada said. If it came from me, he almost surely would have resisted if I tried to give a philosophical, but just naturally on his own, the analogy is given of like a water faucet. If it hasn't been run for years, when it first run, you might muddy, dirty, clogged, polluted water might come out, and that needs to flow for the fresh, clean, tasty, pure water to flow. So he and I co-created a space where whatever was happening, as non-sattvic and non-devotional as it appeared, whatever was happening, he had clear space to express it and be received, understood, and as we said earlier, understanding. I didn't agree with him. I just showed understanding, receiving him. And then his natural affection and appreciation and love and enthusiasm for Srila Prabhupada actually manifested. And then he was starting to wake up and give himself helpful philosophical perspective. So that's what comes to me to share in response to your question.
That's a beautiful example. And I love the metaphor of the water faucet. And that's really lovely. Yeah, and maybe I could ask one more question. Just I work a lot with internal family systems. I don't know if you're familiar so much with it, the different parts and
a little bit. Yeah.
And Richard Schwartz, he's the one that
he
started that.
He's a pillar in the field of family therapy, Richard Schwartz. Yes.
Right. And he just recently wrote a book called No Bad Parts. And, I tend to understand the idea that our psyche is really working for our benefit, but it's misguided and it has, taken on these strategies, extreme strategies from our childhood to give us protection in certain ways. But it does seem like sometimes our parts can be, harmful. And so I don't know if you have any feelings about that or.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. So I appreciate it. But first of all, going back to the early 90s, when I was doing some graduate work in family therapy, I studied Richard Schwartz. I have some early textbook on family therapy by Richard Schwartz on myself. So I've appreciated him for decades and his work. Not that I followed so closely, but I am familiar with him. No bad parts. I resonate with that, right? Because everything is Krishna's energy, right? Right, there's that verse from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Vajragana Gyana, Dvaite Bhadra Brajagana Sabhamano Dharma. Lord Chaitanya says, seeing something materially as this is good, this is bad, that's all a mistake, that's all illusion. So, because it's all bad. It's all bad to the extent that we're not realizing how to respond to it, how to use it in a way that truly supports and energizes self-realization. And if we're not seeing it that way, then it's all bad, even if it brings, superfluous happiness. And it's all good. It's all more than good. It's all auspicious. It's all transcendentally auspicious to whatever, to the extent, whether it's, we mentioned with Megari the hunter, right? So he had these wicked feelings of abuse and like that, and it's all good because he processed and experienced and communicated those emotions, those vindictive, vengeful, sadistic emotions. They're good. He experienced them and communicated them in such a way that brought him to worship Tulasi Devi with a pure heart, to revere Narada Muni. And it all started with Megari the hunter experiencing those bad parts, those malicious, tyrannical emotions. So they're good. So, so everything's Krishna's energy. So, of course, that can become a simplistic bypass. Everything's Krishna's energy. So no matter what everyone does, it's all good because it's all Krishna. No, wrong. There's a truth to that, right? The ninth chapter of Bhagavad Gita. There's a place where Prabhupada says, your grandmother is Krishna. You're Krishna. There's truth to that. Achintya Veda Peta Maya Tattvami. Right. So, Jagadavyaktamurti Matstani Sarvbhuti Nachantishva Vasita. So, Achintya Veda Veda. So the question is, so everything's Krishna's energy. So the question is, how much realization do I have to respond to and utilize this energy, including the energy of this anger, this jealousy, this envy, this elation, someone's resentment toward. How much realization do I have to respond to it and realize it, respond to those energies in a way that supports and enthuses the self to turn towards itself in self-realization, the self to turn towards God in devotion. And to the extent that I have the realization how to respond to to God's energies in that way, then it's all good. And to the extent that I don't, and I respond to the energies in a way that increases forgetfulness of who I really am and my higher principles in life, if I react in that way, then it's all bad.
Thank you. That was a beautiful answer. Yeah, if we can see everything is connected to Krishna, there's nothing, when bad is good. I mean, really, there is nothing bad if we have that consciousness, and that's Krishna consciousness. And that's where we're all trying to get to that eventually, to that, having that vision, that perspective. And that's what all this, emotional work is for, to help us be able to get to that higher vision.
I appreciate that. Yeah, to genuinely go there without artificially going there, and to genuine. That's what the bhakti path, both the watering the garden and the pulling the weeds, is about. To deepen our genuine realization of seeing Krishna everywhere. And again, if we artificially go there, then we're never going to advance because we're denying where we're actually at.
Yeah, so very beautiful. I so much, appreciated your talk, your answers to the questions, and and Krishna's synchronicity and how he arranged for me to be able to be on here with you. That was lovely. So very grateful to you and all the Vaishnavas that have participated, and I'm sure lots and lots more people will listen to it once it gets up on YouTube and it's out there in the world for many years to come. So thank you so much, Dhira Govinda. I was thinking, you have any last closing word you'd like to make before we?
Oh, well, thank you, Archana Siddhi. Thank you, organizers of the Progressive Vaishnavism Conference. And I think I've given a few summaries these 90 minutes of what I regard, so that I don't know that I have more to add. I'll close with a sincere Jai Srila Prabhupada.
And maybe we could just have the devotees, if they want to unmute and just say hello. Anybody that would like to do that, and maybe share. Yeah. Anybody want to do that?
That'll be good, because all I'm seeing is myself on the screen, and I don't know who's here. I mean, I heard Surya and Vrinda Sundari and Padma Patrick, but just so you're aware, I'm only seeing me, so I'm not quite sure who's here.
Oh, you're not seeing the rest of the game.
Maybe there's a way, but I'm not sure how to do it.
Yeah. Well, here's Ravi.
Oh, there we go.
He's
Ravi. Hello, Ravi. Now I'm seeing Krishnananda from New Zealand, I assume. Chandra, Hanuman, Anuradha. Hello, Ravi.
Hello, how are you, Hare Krishna?
Hare Krishna.
Well, anybody want to share anything? What you got from any takeaway you want to share? Anybody?
Anuradha wrote, "Sorry, unable to unmute, but thank you."
Just offered to unmute her now. Hopefully, she can come and say. Anuradha, would you like to say something?
Oh, maybe she can't unmute from her.
And Ravi, thanks. I think you're the one who technically helped us to get it on Facebook, so thank you for that.
That's no problem. I'm glad you could do it.
Save the day. It's been saving the day all weekend. I wonder, are you planning to do another one of these, Ravi, after everything you've been through?
Well, I'm just helping out, but I think judging by the feedback from devotees over the 3 days, I think there definitely will be another one. Yeah, I think it was the topics discussed were really things that devotees are thinking, a certain group of us are thinking about a lot, and maybe not always having the scope to discuss. So, and the speakers were excellent, and the questions and interactions were great too. So I don't see why. I'm sure there'll be more, for sure.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right. Well, I guess we'll wrap up and say Hare Krishna and Jai Prabhupada and all the gratefulness to everyone that made this possible.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Haribol.
Haribol.